Welcome to the Outdoor View, your window into our great outdoors. Hi, I'm Bill Gage, your co-host for today, and I have with me Dan Whisenhunt, CEO of the California Deer Association. Hi, Dan. How are you doing?
Doing well, Bill. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, hey, thank you for coming on. I'm really excited about having our viewers learn a lot more about what the California Deer Association is doing on the ground. Now, let's start by just giving us a real brief background on who you are.
Well, Bill, I grew up in Northern California to a family that frequented and appreciated the outdoors. We could constantly be seen in the outdoors, hunting and fishing and just enjoying time together. And after high school and junior college in Redding, I moved to Sacramento and completed my Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from California State University, Sacramento, and then embarked on my professional career. And 30 plus years later and an MBA later, I've landed at a place where I can work with my passion, and that's wildlife and the outdoors, and that's here at CDA. I came on about 4 weeks before the COVID shutdown. So we haven't had a chance to meet many people and do a lot of events, but we have done some. And it's just preparing us to retool and move the organization to the next level so we can do more for deer and other wildlife.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had the pleasure of working with you pretty much since the day you came on board. And it wasn't too long before we dove into COVID and that shut everything down. But I've had a lot of pleasure in working with you remotely, if you will, in the interim. And I look forward to getting back to the face-to-face meetings and events as well. Tell us a little bit about California Deer Association.
Well, the California Deer Association is a 25-year-old 501c3 nonprofit organization. It was incorporated in October of 1996. The organization was started by a group of sportsmen who were concerned that the money that was being raised by and for sportsmen for the wildlife was not staying in California. A lot of it was being raised by organizations, national organizations, and then it was leaving the state. And it wasn't doing the deer and other wildlife any benefit here in California. They wanted to see that the funds stayed here. And so they started this organization, incorporated it, and started with 5 banquets in the spring of 1997. And they grew from a modest level, and they were modestly successful with the habitat projects that they did. And the board has grown that tremendously. Over the last 5 years, we've averaged putting between 10 and $15 million a year on the ground in habitat projects, treating tens of thousands of acres a year for the benefit of deer and other wildlife.
That's pretty impressive. Yeah, I mean, CDA really is a very young organization, relatively speaking, compared to some of the other nonprofits that are out there working in the conservation arena. But what you've been able to accomplish in the last 25 years on the ground, and the fact that you're pumping 10 to 12 million or more into the ground every year for deer and other wildlife. I mean, damn, that's a ton of money. That is really impressive.
It's actually more than any other big game organization, whether it be state-based or nationally based. We're doing more, and in most years, we're actually doing more than even the state and federal government is doing here in California. And that changes a little bit with the money that's being thrown into fuels reduction here in the in the drought years. But it's still, we're consistently out there and consistently doing good habitat work for deer and other wildlife.
And as you mentioned, I mean, your organization was started 25 years ago by hunters,
Yes.
but it was hunters that cared deeply about deer and where that money was going. Yeah, you guys do projects literally from the Oregon border down to the Mexico border.
Yes, we're actually right now doing habitat work in 5 different national forests here in California, as well as supporting other organizations that do habitat work in the desert in the southeastern part of the state. And we're partnering with organizations that are doing projects in other areas. So we are literally all over the state. And don't forget, Bill, that hunters were the original conservationists. And it's easy for hunters to be thought of as something other than that. But it's hunters that understand conservation the most and then most in depth.
No, absolutely. And it's always, our wildlife and their habitats first, and hunting is a second priority. And then, yeah, we were originally the first conservationists, and we still are the best conservationists, as you know.
Yes.
And in fact, you guys leverage, when you pump money into a project, I mean, for every dollar you put in, I mean, you are leveraging that with a lot of money from other entities, whether it be federal programs, state programs, or what have you, right? I mean, you're taking the CDA dollars and really maximizing their benefit on the ground.
You're correct, Bill, that most grantors, suppliers of money, want to see the grantees, us, come to the table with a little skin in the game or matching funds. And that's how we leverage the money that we raise. And we leverage that many times over to be able to obtain grants for literally hundreds of times the money that we put in as our skin in the game. And that's how we're able to put so many dollars on the ground every year and affect wildlife so drastically.
Yeah, and not only as a largely, hunter member organization, CDAs when they're using their own dollars, they're largely from the hunting community. But when you're using state dollars, for example, the funding that the Department of Fish and Wildlife has in the big game management account, those are hunter dollars as well, right? So the state dollars you're leveraging your own $100 with are in many cases hunter dollars also.
Yes, the percentage of all license fees and tag fees that are sold here in the state of California go to an account that was legislated years ago called the Big Game Management Account. And the California Department of Fish and Wildlife administers that big game management account, giving out grants for wildlife projects and also performing other duties and other tasks that benefit big game specifically.
Yeah, a lot of those dollars go towards wildlife research as well, so that we can be more intelligent about how we manage those species. Dan, there's no question that California Deer Association is doing some absolutely fine work for deer and other wildlife on the ground, literally throughout the state of California, and pumping a lot of money into that. So kudos to CDA for that. But that's not your only program. That's not the only effort that you dive in deeply to ensure healthy populations of deer in this state.
That's correct, Bill. We look at it as a four-legged stool. The first leg is those habitat projects that we just talked about. The second is fundraising, because fundraising allows us to come to the table with that skin in the game, that cost share that I spoke about earlier relating to grants. The third is education. And education is important because of two reasons. One is we need to educate the youth today the importance of conservation and the importance of maintaining our heritage as far as hunting and access of public lands. Number two is we need to educate the general public now, because we are experiencing more and more interface between wildlife and people, especially in the suburban areas or the borderline rural areas. And we need to educate them why we need to manage that wildlife most effectively to the benefit of the wildlife and also to the benefit of the people that live in those areas. Bill, the fourth leg of that stool is advocacy, and that's the area we've had the pleasure of working together. What we want to do is advocate politically on the state level and in local matters also for our constituents to maintain access to public lands, maintain their firearm and hunting heritage rights, as well as representing our constituents and wildlife for science-based management.
Absolutely, Dan. I've really enjoyed working with California Deer Association, on the advocacy front, both in terms of working issues at California State Capitol, as well as regulations that are in front of the California Fish and Game Commission. Not to mention with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, when it comes to management decisions, access to our lands here in California, and of course, maintaining our ability to to hunt game species, including deer as well. Let's dive in a little bit into the education front, if we could, because that's one of the things that is near and dear to our hearts here at the Outdoor View, is reaching out to the people that, through no fault of their own, really haven't been exposed to hunting, either because they live in inner cities and don't know people that hunt, or for whatever reason they're just not getting exposed to it, like pretty much everybody was, say, 100 years ago in this state. Reaching out to them and educating them on the role of hunting in conservation, the role of the hunter's dollar in conservation, as well as other positive things that hunters are doing on the ground, and just getting them to be accepting of hunting. And if they become hunters, that's even better. But if they don't, but if they just appreciate the lead role that we play in conservation, that's a huge win on our front, and certainly a big step towards maintaining our ability to hunt here in California for generations to come.
That's correct. Oftentimes, hunters are made out to be the evil villain in the equation of conservation, but really they're not. They're the original conservationists. Hunters have been practicing conservation as long as there's been people on this continent. And we want to just allow people to find out the role that hunters play. And we want to educate all of those people on conservation and what it means to conserve deer, everything from roadkill situations to the harvest, the legal harvest of deer and other wildlife, as hunters do. All of those messages need to get out in the proper perspective.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned earlier, decisions on what the annual harvest of deer will be in California, for example. I mean, in deer rigs, hunting rigs in general, they're all based on science. They're not based on emotions, so that we can ensure sustainable wildlife populations for a long, long time to come.
And we want to make sure that it remains like that, as well as the balance between deer and other species. That's important as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to note that organizations like California Deer Association, you guys are a perfect example, wouldn't be here if it wasn't for hunters. You were created by hunters, you're still largely funded by hunters, and all the good things that you're doing on the ground are because hunters care for conservation, right? But the other thing is, it's not just what you're doing on the ground. You look at the statewide, for example, here in California, the overwhelming majority of our state wildlife areas, public areas, if you will, were built by hunters and are maintained by hunter dollars today. And if you look at the federal front, the National Wildlife Refuge System, that was built by hunters and it's maintained by hunters as well. And a lot of those lands, both on the state and federal fronts, aren't hunted, but they provide fantastic wildlife habitat. And the hunters are the ones that are paying the tab for that. And we're proud to do it because it's always conservation first.
Yes. And many people, hunters and non-hunters alike, don't really know how many dollars that hunters are putting in, as we talked about earlier, license and tag fees, and the work that we're doing, millions of dollars a year going into forests under the name of fuels reduction, or maybe under the names of sage grouse habitat, but it's also good for deer. It's good for every other elk, every other species. If it's good for deer, it's good for all of them. So what we're focused on is habitat work that can help maintain populations of wildlife throughout the state.
Yeah, not just game species, non-game species as well. Like you mentioned, if it's good for deer, it's good for a whole bunch of other stuff. So
yes,
yeah, thank you for CDA for what you're doing there. Another component that I think a lot of people that are unfamiliar with hunting don't understand is there is a lot of private land out there that is left in wildlife habitat and managed to maximize its habitat values, with hunting as the sole incentive, right? I mean, hunting seasons only last a fraction of the year. These lands that are in private ownership, still on the tax rolls and being done solely with the private dollar, are there year round to provide habitat for both game and non-game species. That's the other component that hunters play that a lot of people don't realize.
Yes, it's a hidden gem of conservation. The private landowners do make up a large portion of the habitat, helping to link together places that are public lands that we can have an effect on by doing their own projects or having contractors come in to do habitat projects on their private lands. And sometimes a share of that is borne by the state and by way of the big game management account or other funds that help them accomplish those things. And the incentive is maybe 1 or 2 deer tags to harvest deer to keep those populations in check.
Absolutely. So hunters come to the table in a variety of ways when it comes to ensuring healthy, sustainable populations of deer and our wildlife here in the state. Let's talk a little bit about the fundraising realm, because that's kind of the underpinning of everything you do, right? I mean, if you don't have the funding to do it, you're not going to be able to do anything on the ground or even administrative effort that it takes to run an organization like California Deer Association. Tell us a little bit about your fundraising arm.
First of all, our members and supporters are the reason we're able to do what we do. It's because of their support. They buy tickets to our fundraising dinners, and they buy items at our silent and live auctions, along with giving financial donations. It's the reason we're able to do what we do. But we have, pre-pandemic, we were doing about 25 fundraising banquets a year throughout the state. And right now, obviously, we're retooling and getting those chapters back up and running so we can have more of those. We've been able to have a few fundraisers lately, but we're definitely not back up to the level that we were before. We have a fundraiser coming up very soon in El Dorado Hills near Placerville, and that thankfully is already sold out. We have fundraisers coming up after the first of the year. Our first one is in Santa Rosa. That'll be January 8th. And then we have one in Redding on February 5th. And after that, it's gonna get a lot more intense. There's a very, very heavy schedule of fundraisers for March, April, and May. And hopefully that'll get us back on track and get our base re-energized and allow us to raise the money that we need to raise to be able to come to the table to those grantors and be able to show that we have financial strength to take on and complete projects.
And as someone who's been able to attend many of your dinners, as well as a lot of the events that other conservation organizations have put on over the years, I can tell you they're a lot of fun. They really are a lot of fun. They're family friendly. I mean, the kids have a great time. The adults have a great time. I mean, it's just a fun family evening.
We pride ourselves on a couple of things, and one of them that our events are family friendly. We have a lot of children, teenagers that attend our events, and many of them walk away with mementos of the evening or raffle prizes, something like that. So in going further into that, our events are a little different than most other organizations' events that you go to, because number one, no two of ours are alike. They have a structure, a skeleton that's the same, but you'll go to 2 events and they'll be totally different. That's the main thing, that nobody ever gets bored. And we have many of our supporters that go to 2, 3, 4 of our fundraisers a year. And we appreciate that very much. And we try very hard to have quality items to auction off, and both on our silent auctions and our exciting live auctions. And we just want to keep our events at a high quality so they're worth going to, and they give some return to our constituents in that way.
Yeah, you also have lots of games and so forth. They're fun for both kids and the adults as well, that I enjoy diving into when I get there too. Yeah. The other thing is you mentioned that no 2 events are alike, and that is entirely true, because you have professionals on staff that are there to help people put on these events, like you say, across the state. Every community is different. And I think the beauty of how each event is structured is it's built by a volunteer committee from that local community, right? I mean, so they know exactly what that community is looking for and would like in an event to make sure it's a lot of fun. And you build it from the ground up with the help of the locals, and it really turns into a fun event.
Yeah, you'd be surprised on how different the beliefs are on what will work and what won't work from Tule Lake to Ventura County. It's funny, but it's true that there are local flavors that go into each banquet and into the games, into drawings, into other activities. And we want to leave it up to our volunteers to empower them to have a distinct impact on that fundraiser and have an impact on their community. So people will have a relationship with CDA.
Right, right.
They'll come back again and again and again and continue to support us.
And you mentioned that you're doing events from Tule Lake all the way down to the Mexican border. And chances are, right, that if somebody's interested in going to a CDA event, they can find one that's close to them. But what if there's not? I mean, what if there's an area out there that doesn't have an event in a reasonable distance, if you will? And if somebody wants to start one, they can do that too, right?
Yes, it's actually very easy to start a chapter and have an event in your area if you don't have one. You can do that most efficiently by going to our website, caldeer.org, CALDEER.org, and clicking on the volunteer tab, filling out a volunteer form and explaining that's what you want to do. You want to start a chapter in your area. Or if you live in an area that already has a chapter, you can go to that same place and express your interest in helping with that event.
Right. And you don't have to be an expert in events to start one or to help on one, right? Somebody that's got zero event experience is interested in starting something near them. I mean, you guys can provide the professional staff to give them the assistance they need to get that event off the ground.
Right. We support our volunteers in the events that we put on. But our volunteers are the key to it all. And it's a bunch of smiling faces and nice people that talk to other people and they get the tasks done that need to get done to put on that event. And that's all it is. So if you can talk to other people and you have a passion for deer and other wildlife, then we want to see you. We want to see you involved in one of our local events.
Yeah, there's no better way than to contribute to the health of our wildlife than to attend a CDA dinner. I can promise you that. You know, Dan, we've talked about the projects that CDA is doing on the ground, which again are extremely impressive. Talked about your advocacy efforts, which is one of my favorite parts, of course, because that's where I get to partner with you to ensure that sound science-based decisions are being made in policy arenas. We talked about the events and the education, of course, as well. But one thing we didn't talk about is CDA is doing more than just education and projects and so forth. I mean, you're doing other things in areas depending on what is needed to help promote the health of our wildlife. Tell them a little bit about the project you've got going here in the Sacramento area that I think is going to provide some very strong benefits to deer.
Yeah, CDA is working in partnership with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to help preserve the deer herd that is in the American River Parkway, the vegetative area along the American River that stretches all the way from the confluence of the Sacramento River near downtown Sacramento, all the way out to Folsom Lake. We are partnering with them in a way that will help preserve the deer and other wildlife in the parkway. In the last few years, there's been some illegal take of deer and some harassment of other wildlife in the parkway. And so we're working with the CDFW to start the equivalent of a neighborhood watch for wildlife along that parkway to help educate the general public of what the problem is and why it's important to be involved. And number two, we're helping educate people that there's actually illegal activities going on that almost everybody didn't know were going on. And so we're partnering with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to start that program. Watch for it, it'll be coming out soon, and take part in it, especially if you live along the parkway.
The fine things that you are doing to protect deer from illegal take, in the American River Parkway, I think it is a perfect pilot project for people beyond and outside of the Sacramento area to look at for in their areas. I mean, everybody's familiar with Neighborhood Watch when it comes to homes and people, but I've never heard of it applying to wildlife before. And I think it's a great idea, Dan. You guys are setting an example that I hope other people will look over the fence, if you will, and start something similar in areas by them where there may be a problem with illegal poaching.
With the growth of population here in California, as I said earlier, there's a greater occurrence of wildlife interaction with people. And so with that comes situations that might present a problem with the harassment of wildlife or the illegal take of wildlife. And so I think it's important for people that live in those areas to understand the resource that is there and help protect it by understanding the laws, number one, and understanding what to look for in illegal activity.
Right, and it's yet another clear example of the difference between hunters, law-abiding people who abide by the wildlife laws and regulations, if you will, and poachers who don't care. I mean, they're just criminals. They don't care what the laws are. And if there's anybody that hates poachers, it's certainly hunters. We hate them more than any other individual out there. I can promise you that. So
the poachers are the people that take game illegally.
right.
Do give hunters, the people that are concerned about conservation, they do give them a black eye. And with this program, we also want to show that hunters, sportsmen, and the California Deer Association is giving back to preserving deer and other wildlife in an area that all hunting is prohibited. So there's no vested interest of any member that we have of any type of gain by us starting and operating this program of Wildlife Watch.
Yeah, it gets back to what we talked about at the top of this interview, which is it's conservation first, right? It's the long-term health of deer and other wildlife first. Hunting is the second priority. So
yes.
Yeah. Okay, Dan, again, I think California Deer Association is doing a great job. I mean, so if somebody out there wants to contribute, wants to get involved, by starting an event or going to an event, or just wants to know more about your organization, what's the best way to do that again?
Best way to do it is go to our website. That's caldeer.org. And from there, you can donate. If you want to just give financially, you can find out about our next event in the news and events tab. You can fill out a volunteer form if you would like to volunteer to help at one of our events or start a chapter. Also, my email address is there. You're welcome to reach out to me if you have questions or if you need guidance in how you can be better involved in the preservation of wildlife, conservation, and also advocating for the rights of our members.
And if somebody just wants to become a member of California Deer Association, I mean, can you talk a little bit about, how much that costs and what member benefits are?
Well, right now we have two membership levels. Our first level is our annual membership, which is $30 a year. And if you attend one of our events, a membership comes with it. And for that $30, you get 4 issues of California Deer Magazine, our quarterly magazine that keeps you up to date on all of our projects, and as well as our advocacy scene that you help us out with. It also gets you the information about all of our fundraisers on your email and on social media, as well as knowing that you're contributing to the conservation of deer, other wildlife, and the management of all the wildlife here in California. Our other membership level is our life membership. Our life membership is $1,000, and that gets you much of the same thing for life, plus more. There's some annual gun drawings and some other giveaways we have for our life members that make that investment in conservation. And we'd love to talk to anybody about that that's interested in a life membership.
Give them that website one more time, Dan.
www.caldeer.org.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed chatting with you. You have anything else you want to add?
I think we've covered everything, Bill. We just invite anybody who's curious about what we do, please reach out to us and find out more.
Dan, thank you for your time today and keep up the good work at the California Deer Association.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate being here.
And thank you to our viewers for tuning in today on The Outdoor View. Tune in to us early and often. We have more exciting interviews coming up in the near future at www.theoutdoorview.org.